Good morning and welcome, Patriot Radio News Hour. I'm Joe Jaquint, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group, and welcome to Monday, the 9th day of January. 800-951-0592 is the phone number. AllAmericanGold.com is the website. Gold and silver are up again today. Gold right now up 1879, kind of bumping right around that 1878 level that we've been talking about. We've got CPI coming later this week. Jason, that could be another catalyst if that CPI breaks below 7.
Yeah, we briefly touched on that today, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a very much a lower number. I was looking at the historical chart for the last 2 years of these CPI numbers, and it doesn't move more than I was thinking it would drop a whole point. I think it could go down to 6.1. I think we're going to see inflation numbers go down and then whip back up. But these numbers have been coming in kind of gradual, so maybe I'll be a little more conservative. Middle sixes, Joe. I can see middle sixes easy, and suddenly everyone's going to cry for drop those rates, right?
Drop those rates. This will be another one of those things. Again, we're just talking about, hey, gold and silver price here. The lower the CPI number, probably the higher the gold and silver price go. And that's just simply because people will speculate, hey, the Federal Reserve isn't going to have to go as high as they've been saying on interest rates. And again, when you don't actually track what you're saying, doesn't really matter. Right. I mean, the inflation numbers are really nothing more than a collection of different numbers adjusted to make it appear better than what they really truly are, and don't actually even reflect the true rate of inflation. And then on top of it, oh, by the way, we also like to not count food and energy in it as well. I mean, it's kind of a sham, but this is where it is. Listen, this is what we have to talk about because this is what the traders put value in.
Yeah, Joe, and we'll keep watching those numbers because they are indicators. They do move the markets. A lot of people go strictly off the numbers instead of looking around, maybe making a little more common sense kind of thought process. I mean, gold guys, Joe, they're common sense guys, but even as common sense guys, you got to watch those numbers because we can't control those numbers, where they go and who's going to be buying. So
we'll have those numbers on Thursday. Those will come out on Thursday. Normally on Mondays, we have Joey with us. We haven't had a show on a Monday in a little while. We're actually working on some technical things. We're hoping to have them next Monday with our YouTube video. We're trying to figure out how we could get them at least with the audio. Hopefully we'll have that resolved for next week. But if you're looking to talk to Joey about your investments, 2022 was not good. 2023, everybody, I'll say this, if nothing else, Jason, it is going to be a volatile year in 2023. I think there's going to be a lot of, nothing's a straight line. We're going to have a lot of ups and a lot of downs, probably more downs than ups, but that's why you give Joey a call, 602-909-9048, and make sure your portfolio is adjusted properly because we're still in this rate hiking cycle. And then, of course, the best part is once you got contact with him, hey, he'll reach out to you and let you know, hey, it's time to readjust your portfolio because now we think the Fed's going to go the other way, Jason.
Yeah, I was just looking at how much gold was bought in 2022. You kept bringing that to the air day after day, week after week last year of these huge purchases. In 2022, they bought more. The central banks and governments of the world bought more gold than at any other time. I think 1967 was, and then the comparison would be this, Joe. They were buying tons of gold in 67, and what were they getting prepared for? A huge economic change in 1971, Joe. It looks like we're on the precipice of something really big coming.
Yeah, and we really, when you talk about the 67, 68, 69, 1970, huge central bank buying of gold. China came out over the weekend and once again added to its official reserves. This is the second straight month in a row. China last month said, hey, we added 32 tons of gold in November. Over the weekend, they said, hey, we've added another 30 metric tons. Think about 1 metric ton of gold is 32,150 ounces. China adding another 30 metric tons. This is their official holdings. Jason and I, most people out there believe China has bought significantly more gold than this. But Jason, this is at least what they're willing to tell the rest of the world that they have as far as gold reserves.
Right. And if this heads towards some sort of a situation where gold is going to be a part of doing business internationally, I know Russia is pushing really hard for this sort of thing. So they're trying to cozy up big time to China. That means that all this buying has a very strong purpose, Joe, and we'll see. I mean, there's something's going to change. I don't know if it's this year specifically, but it seems to be in motion every day.
Yeah, and this is something where China also announcing a currency swap deal with Argentina. This is going to, once again, Argentina now is going to start carrying renminbis in their currency reserves. We've talked about the petro yuan, and we'll talk more about the petro yuan in the next segment. Jason, this is a very real pursuit by the Chinese. And I don't think this announcing of adding to their gold holdings is separate from that. I think these go hand in hand. We'll talk about that when we return. 800-951-0592, Patriot Radio News Hour, and the World Gold Council, as we talked about, letting us know central bank buying just seems to continue pretty much unabated. We're talking about a bad month is 30 to 40 metric tons. We're seeing months now, Jason, where months are 200 metric tons, 300 metric tons. Last quarter was 400 metric tons. I think this quarter, this final quarter, October, November, December, we'll probably see a number about 120, 130 metric tons. But China now, at least for the second straight month, saying, hey, we're just adding 30 metric tons to our gold holdings. They now officially have over 2,000 metric tons. But a lot of people speculating, and it was out in the Times over the weekend. Zoltan Polzar, he's a guy that a lot of people now are talking about. He's an analyst over at Credit Suisse. He's been talking about this move to, I guess, de-dollar the world, Bretton Woods 3, the digital money, Jason, that's coming, and essentially laying the groundwork that China's getting ready and starting to set the stage to be a major player in currencies. They want the renminbi to be used, and obviously, if it's going to have a major role in the world, energy markets have to be part of it because it's so much bigger than any of the other markets.
You know, I mentioned 1967 last segment. Think about the parallels we have right now, Joe, to that. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 60s, and the Russians became a much more darker, ominous enemy. Well, what happened last year? Well, the whole war started. No, Russia's the bad guy. China's the bad guy. And in 1967, you had all this buying of gold. Well, doesn't that, if everything is okay, why are you rushing to gold in 1967? I think other nations knew what Nixon was about to do in 1971, just like I think the nations of the world know what's getting ready to happen with the new economic change, Joe. We got the big boogeyman enemy that's sitting there, making it seem like the world geopolitics is unstable. And you have all these central banks and countries buying tons of gold. Seems like we're in kind of the same place, doesn't it, Joe? Something's getting ready to happen, and everybody's running to gold. And it's all about, hey, for countries to be convinced to keep spending dollars, I think that enemy element has to be there, Joe. So we'll see as I think the dollar will start to come down this year and gold will just go up, and it's going to be quite the ride.
Yeah, so Pozar was talking about how China wants to rewrite the rules for the global energy markets. And its first step was removing the dollar from the orbit of the BRIC countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China. We already know that a lot of trade between those nations occurring in renminbi, essentially calling it a weaponization of dollar foreign exchange reserves. And we're seeing it in what the central banks are doing, because here's what they're doing. Here's what we know. When they're buying this gold, they got to sell something, right? They're selling something to buy the gold. And what Pulsar is saying is they're selling dollars to put gold into their currency reserves. But he's starting to shed some light. We know in December that President Xi was in Saudi Arabia, a big 3-day meeting. We know they signed, I want to say it was 40 or 50 billion dollars worth of trade deals. But something else emerged. And apparently here's how China's playing this. They're telling all the Gulf nations. So not just Saudi Arabia, not just the EAU, right? They're talking Iran, they're talking Kuwait, they're talking Iraq, right? All these other nations. And here's what they're saying. They're ready to make commitments, decades-long commitments to buying oil and natural gas as long as these Gulf nations agree to do it in renminbi, Jason. So a big power play now coming from China.
Yeah, and in talking energy, and once again, it's interesting how our country wants to try to get rid of it, don't pump it, make it less available, right, Joe? Because if you pull off the trick they did in the 70s, the oil embargoes, how is an oil embargo going to make a difference if we're pumping out all we need, right? Doesn't it seem like this is just a contrived, thought-through process, Joe, that makes sure that all the oil-producing nations can squeeze us hard so that this brave new financial world that they're putting together is going to come to fruition, Joe? It's like it's happening, and you can sit there and just watch it.
And we're watching this, and something else, and again, you don't think it's tied together, but it is. How about India over the weekend? They're now the third largest car market in the world, right? China's the largest car market in the world. We're number 2. India is now number 3. And of course, right, making this move, we're anticipating by the end of 2030, India is most likely is going to be the third largest economic country in the world. Of course, we're number 1 in dollar terms. China's number 1 in stuff. It's just a matter of time. Eventually, China's going to be number 1 in dollars as well. And India on the rise. And now China's out there saying, listen, we're gonna set your countries up for decades by committing to buy. And here's what Polzar was saying about what they're talking about. Huge quantities of oil and natural gas. Already more than 25% of all of China's crude imports come from Saudi Arabia alone. And Pozar saying this is all but guaranteed to happen. And Jason, that's a huge game changer, because in foreign currency reserves, the largest piece of every country's foreign currency reserve is set aside to buy energy. And all of a sudden now, that energy, hey, we needed dollars to do it. If you don't need dollars to do it anymore, it's a game changer.
Pozar's calling for a pretty high gold price this year, isn't he?
He's been calling for a high gold price. And I haven't seen any specific numbers, but when he likes to talk over, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Very similar. I would put him there with Kiyosaki as far as what they're looking for. But he did say something I thought was really, really interesting as far as what the Chinese goal in all of this. he said it's much more patient than any Western mind can fathom. It's about slowly chipping away at the dollar and its throne, and talking about oil and commodity markets. He said the Chinese are playing a very, very calculated game, and they're saying there's not going to be, and this is the part that really is interesting, because he says, listen, China's not going to make any big announcement. They're not going to, they don't want to draw any more attention than they need to. There's not going to be any loud noise. He said this is going to happen gradually. It's going to be very slowly at first, and the West is going to struggle to find its footing when the new global energy emerges in the longer term future. So again, when we talk, he likes to talk about 3, 5, 10 years down the road, but saying, Jason, hey, we always say it all the time, don't we? How did you go bankrupt? Well, it was gradual at first. And that's exactly what he's talking about with the renminbi. And he says, listen, it's just gradual right now. But then suddenly, right, the West, and primarily the United States, is going to struggle to find its footing, right, with the new global energy order. And Jason, that's pretty much how you go bankrupt, right? Well, it was gradual, it was a little bit, and then all of a sudden, it was sudden because I couldn't make the payments anymore.
Yeah, I think a large part of this inflation we're having, Joe, is that America's starting to be repriced the actual price of goods and services. We've been, the world reserve currency for so long that some of these goods and services, which have gone up in price over the years, think about how expensive things have gotten over the years, Joe, and the quality of things have gone down year after year after year. But now, I mean, even though these cheap quality, the goods are cheap, other countries have to pay a lot more. Their percentage per their income for these goods that are made, they pay a higher percentage. Well, we're moving that direction, Joe. You're starting to see cheaper, worse quality goods just becoming so expensive. I can't believe every day that I buy something, Joe. And you got to be doing the same. You buy certain items, and we get that there's inflation, but some of it's like, look how crappy this thing is, and I'm paying how much for it, right? Just things that don't even work, right?
It really is shocking here. And again, we're also going to see huge losses from central banks. A lot of these central banks are buying gold to offset losses from these dollar holdings. The Swiss National Bank just reported a huge loss. You got to remember, our central bank now is going to be losses. We're going to add over $100 billion to the deficit in 2023 because the Fed went from, hey, we're making $100 billion on all the debt the money we made out of thin air and bought all this debt with. All of those are losing money now, Jason. And it's really going to be interesting to see, as all of these central banks start piling up the losses, how all of this works out.
Yeah, I saw a chart of the circulating dollars, the circulating, the M2 money sort of in circulation. It's really low. The reason that dollar went up is because of that tapering that they did, the tightening that the Fed is doing. I saw the number, Joe. It's lower than the only time it got as low as it is now was the 1990s. Remember when Newt Gingrich and they were gonna balance the budget, budget. Alan Greenspan, and we're gonna pay the debt off by 2010. Yep. Exactly. And while the money's circulating supply is lower than that, it's for the last 50 years, it might be lower than it's ever been. So that's not gonna stay like that. That just is not the way dollars work as long as it's a world reserve currency. So things are getting ready to change, Joe. I think the inflation coming down the next few months, the CPI number, we're going to get a kind of a whip. It's going to go down, it's going to pop, and it's going to go back up. Because anytime you see inflative cycles, especially the 70s and the 80s, it pops back up. I think the powers that be know that they can't control an inflative cycle. They've got it kind of moving with the soft landing, Joe. I think they've got a version of it, the way this inflation number is moving 0.5% a month up or down. but it could get very rocky, very turbulent here very soon. I think we see it come down, and I think there's a big breath or a sigh of relief by the markets, and then it just comes back, and I think then you see craziness, and that could just be a few months from now, Joe. That could be a few months.
It's like a head fake. We got to watch for that inflation head fake. Right now, listen, we're still in this test of the digital currency. The United States is in that test. We're getting ready to wrap that up. But the ECB now, who is probably a little farther along than we are, says it's outlining how credit institution and payment service providers are going to become the supervised intermediaries responsible for all end user roles in the digital euro ecosystem. In other words, Jason, letting Visa and MasterCard, hey, don't worry, guys, we're gonna pay you guys to run roughshod over our digital currencies, and you'll be the guys that'll enforce our rules. Like, hey, you only can spend X amount on this money on food, or hey, we just sent you a stimulus check. You're only allowed to spend it on food and rent or whatever it may be. Letting these private institutions know, hey, don't worry, we got a rule for you. $800-951-0592. The Dow's up 250. The S&P's up 50. The Nasdaq. I got to turn that mic on. 800-951-0592. The Dow's up 250. The S&P's up 50. The Nasdaq's up 220. Gold's up 1881. Silver's unchanged right now, right at $24. Crude oil's up $1 in change. And of course, I think 2023, is going to be the year of volatility. If you want to make sure you're not involved in that stock market volatility, you're looking for a safe, high rate of return. We've got the solution for you. A portfolio where you'll know every month what exactly you're going to be getting. Your interest is compounded daily. You're paid monthly. There are no fees. In the event that you'd like your money back, there's no penalty. You get your entire principal returned to you. Who am I talking about? You know who I'm talking about. InvestYRefi.com. That's the word invest, the letter Y, then REFY, or call 888-YREFI24, 888-YREFI24. And let's face it, another great bonus is they're the only company out there that's taking these people that have defaulted on their student loans and now have been able, for the right ones, for the ones that qualify, the ones that can do it, enable them and their co-signers to become productive members of society, the greater good happening in the private industry. We don't need government involvement. Heck, Jason, we've been saying it forever. One of the two simple things to really fix things is end the central bank and get our government back down to a much more manageable size.
Yeah, the reason I've always railed so hard against central banking, and it's the Fed. We had other central banks, and it's essentially the same families. But the reason is because all of the crazy stuff that you don't like, there's stuff you're looking at that the government's doing, or that anybody with federal government, the military, all the branches, all that overspending, all that abuse of power, all that corruptness that seems to go unpunished. It's allowed to happen because there's a power base. It's the money. The Fed prints it. The government's hand in hand with the central bank, and they shake each other's hands. It doesn't matter who the citizens are because they don't care. They don't care about you. No, the government hasn't cared about the citizens in decades and decades and decades. And I know there's some new guys that get elected, and they care for the people, but then they get in the meat grinder, which is Washington, D.C., and then they either spit out or they join. And so Joe and I were on.
It's such a big monstrosity. And again, you don't think this stuff is planned? The ECB is claiming, well, we started investigating this euro digital euro ecosystem in October of 2021. By the way, they're saying that they are concluding this investigation, for lack of a better word, October of 2023. That's this year. And here's what they're saying. They said at that point, EU leaders will decide whether to issue a digital euro. I can guarantee you, Jason, I think that decision has already been made by these countries. They're saying during the remaining time, the European Central Bank will continue to assess a number of design and distribution options for a digital euro. So on one hand, they're saying, hey, you know what? The nations aren't going to decide until October. But oh, by the way, we're working on a number of design and distribution issues. Why would you work on those issues unless they were already going to be put in place, Jason? Which, of course, obviously we already know it's coming.
Well, Joe, I think what they're working on, and I think that there's some actual honesty in that statement. I think what they're worried about, Joe, and what they're working on is that they go to a digital currency. They don't want. There's some tests. There's some countries in Africa. There's some Central American countries where it's these government digital currencies are being run side by side with Bitcoin, and they're losing. So they got to figure out you just got to look at these little countries that are already beta testing this, where they're getting rid of the cash already, and then they're going to a digital government currency. And they're seeing how people are going with this. I mean, I forget which it was, Zimbabwe or no, it was one of the African countries. They have it sitting, their government digital currency. They're giving bonuses and giving out free money and doing everything to sweeten the pot to get people to use the digital currencies. That's the government, and people are running to Bitcoin. So Joe, I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out how to make it fluid, how to make it smooth, how to make it seem appealing. I mean, let's face it, with credit cards. Hey, purchase at the store, you get 2% buyback or something, 2% cash back or whatever, right, Joe? They have to figure out ways to make it pay so that nobody runs to it. Because I don't know how they can, except for making a law saying you can't use Bitcoin. I don't know how they're going to compete. I just don't know. So I think they want to go the route of, hey, you have to use this because we're going to give you all kinds of bells and whistles versus, hey, we're just going to take the other one away from you, Joe. I think that's what they're fighting.
Yeah, and I think for the EU and the US and all these other socialist governments, they have so many people on the payroll. If you're on food stamps, if you're on Medicaid, right? If you're getting any sort of government assistance, I think that's just what's going to happen. Hey, from here on out, your food stamps is going to come in the form of a central bank digital currency. I mean, it's really interesting because these third world countries, as Jason's talking about, they don't have that, right? They don't give out, food stamps and all this other stuff. So they've got a little different path where, the nations we're talking about, they've kind of got it built in, at least in the United States. You almost have half the population that you can simply, hey, whether you like it or not, this is how you're getting paid now. This is how you have to do it.
That's a great point, Joe. That's exactly why I think they're testing in these other countries, because they don't have the government giveaways. Because let's face it, a central bank, a Fed coin, so to speak, instituted with our social programs, very easy. It's like, hey, this is never going to be a back and forth situation with Bitcoin. This is going to be the Fed coin. So I think what it is, Joe, is the percentage of the population operating outside of what the Fed coin would be. That's what they need to capture. They need to capture everybody else, the credit card users, the cash users. Hey, we'll yank the cash, but what are the cash users going to do? Well, they're going to run to gold and silver. They're going to find other ways to barter with money and stuff. They need to figure out how to force people into this thing so that they don't run to an outside source like a Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. How about this, Missouri? The latest state. We'll get to it at the beginning of the next segment. Another state not only getting rid of capital gains taxes on gold and silver, but hey, we want gold and silver to be used as money again. I'll tell you who it is. 800-951-0592. Gold's up a dozen now, 1882. Silver's back into positive territory, back above $24. 10th ounce American Gold Eagles. These are going to be 2023s, I believe. Don't hold me to that, but I believe these are going to be 2023s. We should have them here in the next couple of weeks. Jason, we were already pretty much the cheapest around at $260. We're taking it down to $240. I'll get it online as well. $240 on 10th ounce American Gold Eagles. And already our super low silver, as long as I can keep getting it, I'll keep it on. U.S. Silver Eagles at $730. And of course, those rolls of dimes at 110. I'll say this. This is probably the last day on the dimes. I'm not going to be able to replace those. So if you want to get silver picked up, some 10th ounce American Gold Eagles picked up, get ready for the cash to go away, something that you're going to use to barter with things, and potentially in some states being able to use it as money. A bill introduced in Missouri is taking steps to treat gold and silver as money again instead of a commodity, setting the stage up for currency competition. I'll say this is something Ron Paul talked about forever. Let everything compete. We have the technology. We have the ability. If you want to use gold and silver, great. If you want to use dollars, euros, Bitcoin, whale's teeth, right? Hey, let it all compete. That's the last thing. Here's the problem with that competition. The dollar just looks less and less attractive. The state is also gearing up to eliminate the capital gains tax on gold and silver. And Jason, Missouri wants to open a depository. So we've seen Texas do it. Rhode Island's done. We're starting to see more and more of this across the country. Let's face it, people have figured out, right? Hey, we need to get back to sound money. By the way, Utah, Wyoming, they already recognize gold and silver as legal tender. Missouri would be the fourth state to do so. But again, a lot of progress, from where gold was, say, 25 years ago to where it is today, Jason.
I want to go back to competing, value competing with each other. There's no way to actually stop that. That's actually happening right now, Joe. All these things are competing. The problem we have is when you have, let's just take the Federal Reserve note, which is used all through the whole world. You have to use that as the middleman, and it's chopping some of the value. So if I want to take some gold and buy some cows, right, Joe? Yeah, I could just trade the gold for the cow, but that's not what people are convinced in this world, the industrialized world, that you have to go get the currency of that area or the currency of the world, which is the dollar. And what's happening when you use that as an exchange, it's used as a weapon against you to take some of that value. You need a little bit more gold because you have to use more dollars to get that cow, or vice versa. If you want to sell the cow and get yourself some gold, you have to exchange it in dollars, and you get eaten alive, especially with the inflation the way it is now, Joe. It shows you how valueless all these fiat currencies are when it's taking a bigger chunk every single time to get these goods, because they are just robbing it from us. And we went through the entire century, the 1800s, no inflation, Joe. 130 years, no inflation. 140 years, no inflation of any kind. Obviously, with wars and things, there would be some shakeups, but $20 gold piece that we sell all the time on this show, one cow, $20 bill, $20 gold coin. It was the same value, those three things, for over 130 years. And what is it now, Joe? I mean, $2,100 for a $20 gold piece. It's the dollars that's robbing you blind, Joe.
And then absolutely, and really, it's crazy. Most people don't know. They don't want you to know the history. They don't want you to know how we went over 100 years with no inflation, how a $20 gold piece bought the same thing, 50 years ago that it did. Think about the dollar out since we've gone off the gold standard in 1971. It's lost something, what is it, like 98% of its value, right? Since 1971. That's what gold prevented. It had tremendous buying power. It had tremendous purchasing power. You couldn't print money out of thin air. You know, you want to end a lot of these wars. Going back on a gold standard would probably do it, right? Because you couldn't afford to pay for the war.
You know, Joe, it's something we haven't mentioned. I should be mentioning this more. I was talking to my wife over the weekend, and you just got to go to by the bank's terminology. Think about how backwards it is. When you're talking to a bank and you're dealing with debt, they call it credit. It's credit. Hey, how much debt can you service? It's how much credit. It's, hey, you're getting the credit. But what do the banks call it when they have cash in there? They call it a liability, because the banks know they don't want to hold on to it. It's a hot potato, right, Joe?
Right. How fast can we get it off of our books? And again, this is why you put gold and silver away. 10th ounce American Gold Eagles, and we'll have delivery in the next couple of weeks here at $2,040. U.S. Silver Eagles at $730. And then, of course, the rolls of dimes. Last day on the dimes here at $110. And just to let everybody know, listen, we don't sort through our rolls of dimes, quarters, and half dollars. You're going to get, circulated or better condition. We don't take out the nicer ones. We don't take away the Mercury dimes or the Barber dimes like all these other places like to do. And then they'll sell you some cheap damaged ones. But you want nicer looking material. Oh, you wanted Mercury dimes. They charge you those huge premiums. We don't do any of that stuff. At $110 a roll today, 800-951-0592. When we get back, how big of a difference in the oil markets is China's reopening? Well, Bloomberg and Reuters just said China's refiners have placed orders due in 2 weeks, and it's a huge jump. I'll tell you about it next. $800-951-0592. Joe and Jason wrapping it up here. Patriot Radio News Hour on this Monday. Gold's up $14 now, $18.84. Silver back above $24 here, $24.05. Jason, China, Bloomberg and Reuters both reporting China's refiners. They're by the way, China, the largest importer of oil in the world, just put in orders 20% increase from what they were importing, Jason, just 4 weeks ago. So this reopening in China, kind of like Jason said, listen, we're going to have inflation kind of fall for a little bit, but probably just a head fake, and then we're going to see it reemerge here. If China reopens up and really gets it going again, Jason, we're going to see much higher energy prices a lot sooner than people think.
Part of that inflation going down is going to just be demand destruction anyways, Joe. I don't think, like for food, I don't think food stops coming down, but I think cars and hardware, you go to the Home Depot or you go to Walmart and buy junk, I think you'll see the prices flatten out a little bit here pretty soon. You'll see that CPI number, you'll see all these gears in motion, and then a few months, 5 months, 4 months, I don't know, 3 months, 8 months, it'll all come back really hard. I think we're going to see an inflation wave, Joe, that's going to make what we just went through seem a lot nicer. It won't be hugely worse than it is, but it's going to be worse, Joe. I think CPI numbers at 9 and 10, Joe, could actually happen by the end of this year or next year. I don't see how you stop it. There's too much in motion that's shoving this thing into a new, what is it? The Great Reset, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it just, again, we're relying on a central bank to make these decisions when they've been completely clueless. I mean, we talked about it earlier. We're talking about the 90s and Newt Gingrich, Alan Greenspan saying that the debt was going to be paid off by 2010, right? And here we are, we're staring down at $40 trillion. I mean, this is how clueless and baseless these guys really are. Get yourself protected. 10th ounce gold Eagles at 240, rolls of silver Eagles at 730, and of course the dimes at 110 at 800-951-0592. And Jason, it really is going to be very interesting what the number looks like on Thursday on that CPI. I think that's the big number this week. is what does that Thursday number look like? I'll say this, the market's going to be disappointed at anything over 7 and anything in the 6s. And obviously, Jason, the lower in the 6s it goes, the happier they're going to be.
And maybe the faster the rate hikes go down to nothing. So I think Joe's going to be right. It's going to be a half point in February, but we'll see. We'll see if the number comes in at 6.4. You never know. You get a 6.4, and then in February, you never know, right, Joe? But it's
And we
like
haven't gotten a lot of retail. Macy's has come out, said, we didn't make the numbers. It wasn't a great Christmas for us. Yeah. Lululemon was out today, said, hey, we sold stuff, but we had to mark it down. Our margins weren't very good. But at least today anyway, we haven't seen any big waves of layoff announcements. Jason, we'll see what happens in the next few weeks.
Yes, the next couple of months are going to be really interesting. So 2023 is there's a path that's chosen, Joe. It's just, I think it's always been, how fast is this thing going to move in a certain direction, or how slow is it going to move? That's all there is to it, Joe. We, Patriot Trading Group, just let's that last segment. We don't deal in credit or liabilities. We sell money, gold, right, Joe?
That's it. 800-951-0592. Jason and I were coming back with the half-empty cup and a first-time guest on the half-empty cup as well. So we'll see how that works out. God bless everybody. We'll talk again tomorrow.